thank you for coming today to talk to
Yeah,
me.
of course.
I really appreciate it. So tell me about, you started UFE about what, 3 years ago? When did you
I
last?
started UFV right after I had graduated. So I graduated in 2017, and then I started in the September. And I just started because of the way that UFV's nursing program is set up. You can't come in straight after high school. So I did electives essentially. So I took a statistics course, I took a French course, an English course, and essentially they were all things that would help me like within my degree. So they're all things that are required in different semesters of the nursing program. But by doing them in that first semester, I actually made my load lighter. So like this past semester, I only had 3 courses, but I was still taking a full nursing degree, if that makes sense.
So what is it that's been hard for you since you started university? Many things,
For
probably.
me, the driving time's hard. No, I just have to drive so long, so I lose time doing that. But academically, I think just the volume, it's always something to adjust to because interestingly enough, you always feel like, oh wow, I've maxed out, like that's the most that I could study, or that was such an exhausting semester. But then inevitably, as you go up higher in grades and there's more expected of you in your learning, then you're expected to be able to memorize and absorb more information, and so it always ends up getting done. But I think that's always the greatest challenge, is just the sheer amount and the size of content is so extreme. I have it piled up on the side of my window, and the stack is like that big for just one course. It's crazy, but it's really interesting stuff, which helps, I think, to like learn that excessive sort of amount of information. Yeah, I would say I was pretty well set up in terms of like having memorization strategies, or just even learning how to like condense the information to understand it, and then that would help me in terms of like synthesizing and then being able to figure it out within that like larger context of having so much information to do that with. Group work is sort of a continuing struggle, but that's not really necessarily on me.
Yeah, it's everybody, right? Collaborate.
Exactly, yeah.
Sometimes others don't take their part seriously.
Yeah, and it's funny because like even within my program, which is everybody in it deserves to be in it and has done a bunch of steps in order to, like good grades or good references, and they've done an interview and they've written an essay, all of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that like once you're in the program, everybody's going to pull exactly equal weight, unfortunately. So sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating, but there's only one usually each semester.
Yeah. You just have to pick up their pace for them sometimes.
Exactly.
So tell me, what would you say to somebody in high school or elementary school that they should master their study habits, or something that will help them to be in a course like yours?
I think the biggest thing would definitely be time management. That's a huge piece. And I know for sure, like doing online school for me prior to going into university was a really grateful stepping stone that I had, just because without it, I wouldn't have really understood the value of like in university oftentimes, and in high school, especially like if you go to Thomas Haney, you're given the work and it's sort of like, yeah, there are classes, but you're on your own for a lot of intensive purposes. And so I think definitely being able to just sort of self-motivate and like manage your time, and especially like when I had sports, being able to divide your responsibilities and still get things accomplished was huge. And definitely, like I was saying, when you have this massive amount of information that you're, synthesizing in, like you can't just memorize a lot of these sort of courses. Like if you're trying to memorize like if you were purely in a biology course that was about plants, yeah, you could just memorize that. But if you wanted to do your own research, you're going to need to be able to apply that information. Same with nursing. Like if you just purely memorize the facts, then you're going to be an awful nurse, because you can't just, give a textbook out as care. You have to actually be able to apply all the things that you've learned. And so I think, just really being able to manage your time and truly like slowing down where you need to and understanding information when it's appropriate, but also at the same time being efficient and knowing how to study. Yeah.
Because you during high school had a very heavy schedule of sports too, right?
Yes.
Like you were going to championship tournaments and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you had online, which you managed on your own. So you already had a very good preparation of that.
I was very fortunate for that. Yeah.
Yeah, your parents did very well setting you up online.
Oh yeah, I mean, having two parents as educators was like the most ideal thing I could have ever. I was very fortunate. I had some great teachers too along the way. Like my grade 10 English honors teacher, he used work in terms of like the frameworks that he did or like the classes that he would teach, and he would use lesson plans that I actually continued to use in grade 11 and 12 because they were so well done. And like I think I used his framework to help study for my like grade 12 English provincial exam. Like it was excellent. So yeah, I was really lucky in that context too.
Yeah, when a teacher really dials it in, it's really good. You can use it.
Yeah.
So when we met we met for chemistry and math, right? So those were two subjects that were not that much of your favorite subject.
Not at all, yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting because like I certainly, now that I'm in a profession where, yes, there are some things that you learn just because you truly just have to, depending on the area of like education that you go into. But certainly like with pediatric nursing, all the medication is actually calculated by weight, which means I'm doing math every single time I do a calculation. And like for, we call them neonates, so a child born in their first 28 days of life, it's incredibly dependent upon how much you're going to give. And yes, everything in pediatric nursing is double checked by an RN, and certainly as a student, you're not the one who's just drawing it up and giving it. But in terms of competency, you definitely want to be able to show that you can do that. And so doing that math multiple times a day for different patients a day, you really have to be organized, but also have an understanding, a basic understanding of the things that certainly, like I know you help lots of kids, you tutor them from, early on in school up until later high school. You're not using calculus to do these calculations, but the foundations of what a lot of things in pre-calculus and calculus are based on are these things that I'm using in everyday life. And so I think that was really important to learn. But yeah, chemistry, I mean, even something like that, I think too, just being able to have a really strong foundation has helped me in other forms of sciences. Yeah, for sure.
So what was it that from me that you learned that helped you most?
I think obviously, like aside from like the academic piece, and I will come back to that, but I think a huge thing that you offered was just confidence for me personally, because I always had the capacity to do it and I had the ability to understand the information. It was just sort of, I had drilled this disdain for those subjects into my head, and I didn't really want, and I would just do a question, I'd get frustrated and I wouldn't know how to figure it out, and you would just be so patient and you kind of look at me and you'd be like, we just did this, or you know how to do this, and then you wouldn't say anything and you'd give me kind of time to figure it out. And I remember so many times I would look at you and kind of have that aha moment. And true enough, like I think just with time, we'd be able to meet before I had an exam or before before I had an assignment due, and just being able to sort of have the support where I needed it, but also just have that confidence instilled in me that like, oh no, like you can do this, you can go write this test and you can figure this out, sort of thing. But certainly just, I think the big thing too that you also offered was the way that you would explain things would always be in a slightly different way than I had read prior. And so it was really helpful where if I had, seen a note in a chemistry textbook and I just read it and I just thought like, this is like reading Braille, I have no idea what this is saying. You would sort of, just change it and paraphrase it into a different way that was more easier to understand. Or I remember you would use visual aids a lot. And for me, that was really helpful. So just seeing the information in a unique way, but also just in a way that was sort of condensed and almost put into layman's terms, but still using the information.
Bringing it to everyday language, right? And
exactly, yeah.
More like something that you can visualize.
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what I would say.
And then also, like, I think also you were very like organized, like one of my best students in organization. Because you were on your own, right? Online school.
Yeah, entirely.
yeah. And very determined. Like you know what you wanted to do from young age. Right? That helps, right? You found your interest right early on.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of kids that I'll talk to, whether it's like in the hospital that I'm caring for or just in everyday life. And I think that's a huge thing when they get asked, they're like, I have no idea what I want to do. But I think the biggest recommendation, like for me, I'm grateful because when you are that age, I was actually talking about this with a friend the other day, and we were both in nursing. We're saying like, thank goodness, because when you pick at that age, like you don't have to pick a path that like is your only path, but it's so great. And we were saying this, that we kept all our doors open because I took, math to the extent that I did, or chemistry or bio, like I had the opportunity to decide to do whatever I really wanted in terms of like every door was open academically. And I think just too, like you said, being organized and being a strong student doesn't mean that you can't ask for help either. Like for me, I needed that extra confidence, and I needed just like, I didn't have any teachers, so having someone help and tutor me was like hugely important. And for a lot of kids, I mean, there's this like stigma around, oh, you see a tutor, or like, oh, you need to go help, like you need to get help from a tutor. But I think, asking for help and asking for that just extra foot up is so incredibly important, because it opens so many doors, and I think so many kids don't know what they want to do. And I was lucky enough that I knew nursing was what I wanted, and it will bring me right into a career pathway. But like I was saying, the skills that you learn, you can use in every area of life. I think there's so much misconception around like, oh, I just have to learn these things because they're here, but it's actually like, oh no, this will come back. And whether you're in fashion and you have to figure out the exact measurements you need to do, and you're going to use math when you do that, or something like nursing where you're using math or sciences every day.
And I think the math you use, it's the elementary foundational math, right?
Absolutely. It's algebra.
It's not the calculus you ever learned.
No, exactly. So
that's why the foundation is the most important part.
We solve for X every day.
Solve for X. and then I was going to ask, is one of the things I think you needed the most was confident, but the confidence came from someone telling you, like you said, the English teacher gave me a format. I still use it, right? You wanted a format that worked. You wanted a systematic format, some kind of structure that you could always rely on, not like one time it works and the next time it's like it doesn't work. So exactly. When I was able to give you that, you just started flourishing. Like you just needed that somebody to give you some sort of stepping stone. Okay, if you go this way, for sure the answer's there. And if you use it again, it might be manipulated in some way, but if you follow these steps, you can still get to there. And then when that came along, you just started doing really well on all of it, right? Because you had the other pieces, the organization.
And I think the fact that you do that for kids, like you provide very individualized sort of studying help, and that's really important because not every kid learns the same way. And I think just being able to go to you and talk with you and learn from you really helped, because you would cater to like the strengths of each individual, and whether that was a visual learner, or I remember like I would come and sometimes you'd have supplies set out from the previous group, like actual things that they like, tactile things that they could hold and learn with, and that's incredibly important to some kids. And for me, it was just seeing different diagrams or just hearing it explained in a different way was so helpful, because I was just only seeing it one way from one textbook because I wasn't having an instructor. And so for me, having someone who made it very individualized learning was incredibly important.
It's very important for all the kids, right? That's why the model in school doesn't work for everybody.
Exactly.
You were in school, right? But you wanted to go online because it was in the healthy environment for you. So you took this online, and it worked very good for you for whatever you're doing right now too, right?
It actually set me up. I've used it in pretty much every interview I've had for schools, like for university or for jobs, and it's been an incredibly popular selling point.
Yeah, because you've managed yourself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Like instead of a lot of people who are just think, oh, I have good time management skills, it's like, oh well, I had to, or I wouldn't have graduated. Yeah.
Exactly. So now that we're among this change, right, big with the COVID and everything, and in your, especially the field you're trying to get into, it's a big change. Do you, I know you have a strong mindset, right, about change and stuff. You face it like, whatever the best we can get out of it, it's what it is, right? So has that put any kind of like, have you been feeling bad about anything? Is that, or are you?
I think when everything was sort of brewing, it was definitely even for me, and I definitely grown a lot in terms of my like adaptability to change, and in my profession you definitely have to because that's the nature of the job. But certainly when everything was sort of coming, and I think you could go up to any nurse and ask, or even physicians. I remember being on the floor and you would just sort of sense this like nervousness because it's a complete unknown what was coming, and everybody kind of knew that it was huge and you just didn't know to what sort of extent. And I remember when everything sort of like, I was watching other universities close, and I was hearing, like, I was talking to my other nursing friends at different schools, and I was saying, like, what are you guys doing? How are you guys going to make it up? That initial period, like we had a week transition, was super stressful. And it was stressful for any of a number of reasons. We had a paper due, we had a huge project, and then of course it was finals. And just even figuring out, like, how is this all going to work in terms of, like, when this goes online, how are we going to make up clinical hours? But I think, you know, eventually you just get to a point, like we were saying when we first started our conversation, everybody adapts. Everything adapts in order to survive. And so that's what everybody did. And it all worked out in the end. So I think just having that perspective of, like, take a breath, it's going to be okay. It will figure itself out. And that's sort of inevitable. And like, even for us now, we don't really know what the future looks like going ahead. We don't know what schools are going to look like, you know, elementary schools, high schools, universities. Even for me, even in a profession that, you know, you would expect to be pushed forward, you still need to have the competencies and the skills. So I think just slowing down and trusting the process, and, like, it is going to get accomplished, and you're going to, you know, finish whatever it is, whatever grade or whatever university, with the skills that you need to be successful. And yeah, I think it's definitely a time of uncertainty for everybody, but I think now more and more we're seeing less about, like, you know, the fear and frenzy, and people are just, even for example, buying less toilet paper, thank goodness. But they're posting more about, like, hope and messages of just, like, looking forward to, and I think that's a lot more powerful than fear. And so I think just always having that perspective of, like, a brighter day is gonna come. And yeah,
I think we were all going really fast in our life.
Exactly.
And then it kind of was a pause for us all, the whole world, to, I think, reanalyze what are we doing, right? Like, it's a good pause, I think. Even though it was a hard pause for a lot of families, I'm sure they had a lot of loved ones lost and all that stuff. It's hard, but beyond that, I think for those of us who just was told to stay home, that wasn't that hard to do. I mean, it was hard, but it could have been worse, right? If it was
absolutely
a war or something, that's a totally different story, right? So we were all kind of safe in most part. So I think a lot of the students, like some of the students, high school students, they were told there's no more exams. So some of my students have checked off for the summer. It's like they're off for summer. So it's been hard. But for you guys, you did have exams online.
Oh yeah, some programs in university didn't. Their exams were pulled, or they did them in different ways. Like I had a few friends in different nursing programs who they did forum posts, or they did just different sorts of evaluations. But no, we had all our exams. So I had two finals that were both 40% of my grade, and I had one that was 50% of my grade. And they were all timed. Thankfully, my class actually pushed back, because originally what the school wanted to do was have it as a minute, I think, per question, which the way that nursing school questions are set up, you have these questions that are select all that apply, and select all that apply is different than ones that you've had previously, maybe in high school. It's that if you choose A, B, C, and D, but the correct answer was A, B, C, D, and E, and you didn't select E, you actually get the whole thing wrong. And they're on the NCLEX exam, which is our entrance exam, and so it's great that we have them, because it prepares us incredibly well for the actual exam that we will write one day. But it's very stressful in terms of, it does take a lot more time to understand, and sometimes you read the question over again, or you really you'll kind of go through and you'll be like, okay, it's not that one, it's this one, and you'll sort of work through each section that you can. And sometimes the questions just have more writing to them as well, and so we were quite upset about the fact that you'd only have a minute for every question, even though each question was different. So we actually got back to the heads of our semester, and they ended up changing that for us. But I do know a semester ahead of us, they had timed questions for each one, and it was certainly a challenge. So I think being able to stay calm, for us, we just had a set amount of time on the whole exam. But you had to stay calm, and if you didn't know something, and it was a closed book exam as well, so we were expected to maintain all the things that you would if you were writing in class, and no open books, no using resources. And so I think just being very conscious of the time that you were spending on each question. And it's different than if you didn't know it, it's so unique in that on a test you can just come back to it, but here it was you had to click forward and that question was gone, and so you just kind of had to let some things be, and that was what it was going to be, just because there's no other way they could have done the testing format for us. So adaptability to change was a big piece of exams. Yeah, it's tough. Mm-hmm. But you did it.
So
yes, we're done. And I passed everything. Well, I will pass
awesome.
everything.
Awesome. So what are you looking forward to this summer, like coming up? Like what is the plan? So you said you had somewhere you're working, right?
Yeah, I actually did end up getting a job. So I was able to get a job before the pandemic with the employed student nurse position, but then that was pulled because of the pandemic. So that was pretty heartbreaking for a little bit. But then I actually, through a friend that's also at my nursing program, I heard of this gentleman who has cerebral palsy, and he needs like nursing care in the mornings and the evenings, and then he requires just a support person essentially throughout the day. And it's a really unique position, and he's quite young, so it's great just in terms of like spending time together, and you can while maintaining like professional boundaries, of course. It's great just to be able to have a relational focus of care that's so different than what you might have in a hospital, because with someone who has a chronic illness, you can really form some just totally great connections and bonds, and it's so fascinating too to have the nursing care component and learn a bit more about his disease. And he's won awards for like a Young Philanthropist Award. He's raised money for an awareness for cerebral palsy, so it's really great.
Awesome, congratulations. Yeah. I guess with social distancing, I guess, right, we have to be careful, I guess.
Yes, it's definitely, and that's sort of why, like I mentioned to you, like my circle of who I see is very small, or if I do go see anybody, it is like I'm sitting on one end of their driveway and they're sitting on their other. Because he obviously would be considered an essential service. He needs people to perform his functions of daily living. So certainly if I am putting myself at risk, I'm putting my family at risk, but I'm also now putting someone who is significantly immunocompromised at risk. So
Cool. So I think one of the things I remember about you is that the confident and stress, right? I mean, now that you probably studied a lot about stress in degree as well, they go hand in hand, don't they? Like you would always stress out about a lot of stuff when it comes to exam or something. That was something, but the confident, as you get more confident, that replaces that stress, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And
I think that's a big piece. Like the more, it's not just about like the surface level of understanding. It's like, can you truly can you do something forwards and backwards? That's the best way to explain it. So it's like if someone gives you a question and you're doing 6 different questions, or you're doing 6 forms of that same question, but all your math is done the same way, or the question is just different words, but it's asked the same way. Well, could you actually answer it if it's asked in the opposite way? Or could you use the same numbers, but or the same formula, but apply them in a different context? And I think that application piece is huge, because everything in nursing we have very little regurgitate things. So we don't get tested on definitions. We don't get tested on these little piddly details. We get tested on these huge concepts that you can't just memorize. You can memorize key pieces of them, but the pathway for how diabetes works is really complex. And yes, you can memorize that, absolutely. I would hope and expect that physicians or dietitians and nurses definitely have really important pieces of that memorized. But for an exam where that is one of maybe 6 huge things that you have to memorize, I think it's so important to just be able to truly understand the functions of each thing that you're moving through. And so with something like math, being able to understand okay, that's why I'm using this here. And if I move from that, then this is the next natural step. And those things that you learn and that you helped sort of instill the confidence in me, and being able to trust that I can figure out the process is so helpful. Because when you have confidence that you can accomplish the skill, your stress for that what if it doesn't go well, or I don't know if I know this goes down, because you have this just innate understanding that, well, I can apply the concept, so it doesn't matter what question I'm going to be given, because in some way I can get some marks, if not all the marks, because I know the foundations of how to build on my understanding.
It's very important. It's a lot of people teach the questions or try to see question by question. That's not it, right? The concept.
Exactly.
You need to see the big picture. Of course the little parts are important, but the big picture is what drives you, the confidence that I can see it, how I can go in and manipulate certain things to get the answer, right? Yes. What are you looking forward to this summer or in the future?
I mean, now that the parks are opening up, I'm really excited just for hiking, because I haven't been able to do that. And I live right by Golden Ears. I can see the park from my window. And so for me, it was really tough. We would walk into the forest and there's all these signs. And so you can't go very far, which has been super upsetting. But now that it's opening up, I'm really excited to just be hiking. And I think that'll be a huge part of summer, which will be great because you can still obviously do social distancing while you're hiking. So I don't have to worry about that. I didn't have any travel planned, thankfully. So yeah, maybe looking forward to that in the future, but who knows what that's going to look like. Yeah, even if it's around BC.
When will you start working as a nurse? Like if all finishes, and when will you get your license?
So I will be officially graduated as a RN from my BSN program in December 2021. And then I'll write my NCLEX, which is like the nursing entrance exam. UFV actually has a 100% success rate on the first try, which is pretty wild. Awesome. So hopefully I won't break that. No, I'm sure it'll be fine. But that will be, so I'll probably take a few months to study for that. So I should be fully finished and like considered an RN come March or so of 2021. Yeah, take a couple months and then so but it's cool because with nursing you can actually work under like a temporary license. So as long as you've graduated from a program, you can actually work prior, like in your run up to writing the NCLEX. You can have a job, you can be hired, you can be working. So hopefully next summer, pandemic provided and virus and everything, I'm going to try and get a position as an employed student nurse out at BC Children's Hospital, and then maybe try and get a job there once I've graduated.
So you like working with little babies?
It's my absolute favorite. Yeah, babies to teens are my absolute favorite.
Nice. It's rewarding for sure.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah, incredibly so. And I think it's great too because it's not just the kids, like you have the whole family, and the family aspect of care is so unique. Like you do have that with adults, but to a lesser extent, and so with kids it's their whole world, which is just fantastic to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you guys get a lot of is there courses to address stress, like because it's very stressful?
Yeah, we absolutely. So they definitely talk about it a lot in the first semester. It's a big concept that you cover and they're really good about too encouraging like the resources that UFV has in terms of like counseling and just even like, supporting your peers, but also like the profs are very good about like you can go to them and just say I'm really overwhelmed or whatever, and they're great about that. But definitely they push it a lot in the first semester, and then we actually do a psych rotation in our fourth semester, and that I found was really helpful because there's one prof in particular, her name's Bethany Geel, and she is spectacular. She's a psychiatric nurse, but she's incredible in terms of just promoting mental health, and she really places the importance on like taking care of yourself and addressing your own needs as a nursing student, because in a lot of situations, whether it's like with the with our studies and academically, there's a lot of stress, but certainly in terms of clinical, we're put in lots of really demanding situations where you have to perform and apply those skills, because clinical is an entire application of the skills that you learn, whether it's in lab or through a textbook. And so that it's definitely been a position that's really been pushed with with our program. It's been great.
So I'm very proud of you to step up and go, and I think it's like rest of the frontline workers, right? Like it's one of those things, if anything comes in the future, you'll be there, right?
Yeah, no, it's a very humbling thought, but it's also, I think with everything going on, it's sort of reminded me how fortunate I am to be going into this profession, because you're just I think you're just so respected in this profession, and I think that's a really honorable thing to get to be a part of.
Yeah, interesting. It's very interesting. So anything that you learned that helped you in college that you want to share with me?
I think I've kind of mentioned most of it. I think the time management was a huge piece, building confidence to minimize stress, having an understanding that works from the ground up. Like you can't just jump in and figure out a few questions, because I remember a lot of even chemistry or math textbooks would be set up where you would work through 5 questions and they'd essentially be the exact same question, just with different numbers. That doesn't enhance your understanding or your knowledge at all. It's when you can do what the whole chapter is teaching on different sorts of questions. Like, don't shy away from the questions that have the huge written component, because that's actually the application one. So the ones that feel the hardest are because they are the most difficult, but they're actually the ones that will give you the most benefit, because then you'll be able to get any sort of shorter question. And so I think, just not being afraid of challenges was really impactful for me, and that's definitely helped me a lot.
And well, I just had it in my mind. I forgot. I was going to ask you something on that thought. Oh yeah. What advice would you give a high school student who's in this situation right now? So what advice would you give them?
Like within the pandemic situation?
Yeah, just in terms of, you're very confident, independent, and very strong person, right? And you take stress very, you now have a system to deal with stress.
Yeah.
Throughout your high school, for sure, you learned a lot of, effective ways, as well as a, university student, you've gone through major stress.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
You are. What would you advise?
Yeah.
Because they always say they're very stressful, but I don't think they've seen enough stress that you've seen in university, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's kind of like pain. It's one of those things that for every person, it's a different experience, right? And I think just there's so much stigma still around mental health, and that's been something that within nursing has really been beneficial to learn about. And I think just like promoting the fact that like it's okay to talk about it with your peers, talk about it with your tutor, talk about it with your teachers and your parents. Don't feel like this is a burden that you have to carry alone while you're walking through these super uncertain times, because everybody's got stress and everybody's dealing with it in their unique ways. But maybe a friend has a piece of advice they can offer, or maybe a parent who, I remember like as an adolescent, it's certainly the last thing sometimes that you want to go and bring to your parents, because they seem like these people who just know everything, and why would you take it to them? But at the same time, they've walked a path before you, and they have a whole book of knowledge that you can glean from. And so I think just really turning to the people in your life, but also I think using resources. Like there's some great apps for relaxation and de-stressing, and drawing on those, or if need be, like going and speaking to someone and utilizing resources where you have them. I know like our university has put out a bunch of counseling services. I don't know if like high school students have been given that. I would hope so, but certainly like using those and seeing people who are trained to help with that is really helpful. But also just taking time to give yourself breaks, I think, because when you put a lot of, like I put a ton of pressure on myself when I was in high school, and I definitely to this day have a perfectionist mindset. And I think for a lot of kids, and for me, that can just be crippling, because then as soon as you start making mistakes, it's the end. You can't continue, can't move past that. And I think just remembering like change is inevitable. You don't know what a future holds. You have to be able to adapt. And so something may not go your way, but that doesn't mean you didn't learn something from it. And even if you didn't get a grade that you wanted, that doesn't mean you didn't learn something from the grade that you got. And I think, yeah, just the adaptability and remembering to take a breath, and that it is all going to work itself out, just like everything that we're going through right now. Remembering to breathe, remembering to, be hopeful, but also like learn from the past. The whole point of this isn't that we're supposed to go back to the way things were. That's what got us in this situation. But certainly it applies to education as well. If you want to do better, or you want to get out of stress, then you have to really look at how you're living or how you're studying, and see like what changes can be made. But also just remembering not to put too much pressure on yourself, because if you do that, then like change isn't going to happen, because we have to be calm and we have to be ready and prepared to make any sort of changes in our life.
I think finding your own balance, right? Everybody has their internal balance.
Yeah.
You can, what works for you is not going to work for someone else.
No.
You can't compare yourself. I think constant comparison within ourselves, we can get into a bad territory and start feeling negative about your own self. Yeah. But if you could just step back and say, what can I do? And how can I make it better? It's okay, I made a mistake. Is all of it is very, very good. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. I so appreciate you taking your time to talk to me.
I'm so happy to.
Yeah, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.